Get your finger off that trigger. Commander Jack Sullivan turned so quickly that the conversation behind him died. The voice hadn't come from his range chief. It hadn't come from a safety officer. It came from Emily Carter. She stood 10 feet behind Petty Officer Tyler Grant, a young SEAL sniper lying prone behind his rifle. Grant had already settled into position. His breathing was controlled. His cheek rested against the stock. Downrange, a steel silhouette waited beneath the morning haze. Grant looked back. "Excuse me." Emily didn't raise her voice. "Don't fire." Sullivan stepped between them. "This is my range, Carter." Emily's gray-blue eyes remained on Grant's rifle. "Then you should want to know why I'm stopping him." A few operators exchanged glances. Sullivan had met her less than 2 hours earlier. As far as he knew, Emily Carter was a precision warfare attachment sent to observe his training program. Nothing more. Now she was interrupting a live firing sequence in front of his team. "Range control cleared the lane," Sullivan said. "I'm not talking about the lane." Emily moved closer. Grant instinctively lifted his finger away from the trigger. Sullivan noticed. "So what exactly are you talking about?" She pointed toward the optic. "His mount." Grant frowned. "I checked my zero yesterday." "I know. Then it's good." Emily crouched beside him without touching the weapon. "Look at the rear ring." Grant looked. Nothing obvious. Sullivan folded his arms. "I don't see a problem." "You will." "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in courage and respect, hit like and subscribe. These stories inspire change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Emily." Sullivan's expression hardened. "Explain." Emily pointed at a hairline shift near the mount. "That optic took an impact." Grant hesitated. "My rifle case fell off the bench this morning." Sullivan looked at him. "You didn't report that." "It barely fell 2 feet." Emily finally looked at Sullivan. 2 feet is enough. The rifle was taken cold and checked. Minutes later, the result came back. The mount had shifted. Barely. But enough to move the point of impact far off target at extended range. Grant stared at his rifle. Sullivan stared at Emily. "You spotted that from 10 feet away?" "Yes." "You think you're better than my shooters?" Emily stood. "I didn't say that." Sullivan pointed toward an empty firing lane. "Then show me." For the first time, something changed in Emily's expression. Not fear. Not arrogance. Almost disappointment. "You really want to do this?" Sullivan held her gaze. "I do." Emily picked up her rifle case. "All right, Commander." 2 quiet latches opened. And across the range, Chief Robert Mitchell suddenly stopped smiling. 2 hours earlier, Emily Carter had walked through the gates carrying everything she needed in 2 hands. A faded olive duffel. A hard black rifle case. Nothing else. No escort waited for her. No senior officer crossed the compound to welcome her. There was no ceremony announcing that someone important had arrived. Commander Jack Sullivan noticed her from outside the operations building. She was 38, compact and athletic, with dark blonde hair pulled beneath a weathered cap. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who already knew where she was going. Sullivan checked the tablet in his hand. Emily Carter. Precision Warfare Attachment. He scrolled down. Rank, restricted. Operational history, restricted. Advanced qualifications, restricted. Deployment record, restricted. Sullivan frowned. He had commanded SEAL training evolutions involving classified personnel before, but this was unusual. People sent onto his range normally arrived with enough information for him to understand why they were there. Emily stopped in front of him. "Commander Sullivan. You know who I am." "Yes." Her tone was polite. "Nothing more." Sullivan studied her. "Combat experience?" "Yes." "How much?" "Enough." He waited. Emily didn't elaborate. "Sniper qualified?" "Yes." "Where?" "Several programs." Another short answer. Sullivan lowered the tablet. "You always this specific?" "Only when I'm allowed to be." Before he could respond, movement across the compound caught his attention. Chief Robert Mitchell had been supervising an ammunition detail. Then he saw Emily. Mitchell stopped. His posture changed instantly. For half a second, it looked as though the veteran chief was about to come to attention. Then he caught himself. Emily gave him a small nod. Mitchell returned it. Sullivan noticed everything. "You two know each other?" Mitchell answered carefully. "We've met." "Where?" A pause. "Overseas." Sullivan looked at Emily. She offered nothing. Something about the exchange bothered him. Not because it was suspicious. Because Mitchell respected very few people before watching them work. Yet whatever history existed between them had changed his entire posture. Sullivan handed Emily a temporary range badge. "My facility. My procedures. If you see a problem, you bring it to me." Emily clipped the badge to her uniform. "Understood." Then she picked up her rifle case and walked toward the range. Sullivan watched her go. He still didn't know her rank. Didn't know her record. Didn't know why half her file was locked. But less than 2 hours later, she would stop one of his snipers from pulling the trigger. And Sullivan would discover that the missing information in Emily Carter's file wasn't nearly as important as what she could see with her own eyes. The challenge began the moment Emily opened the rifle case. Conversation along the firing line faded. Inside was a precision rifle that looked nothing like a display weapon. The finish was worn near the controls. Small scratches marked the stock. Nothing decorative. Everything functional. Sullivan looked down at it. "Your personal rifle?" "One of them." Chief Mitchell heard the answer from several yards away. His expression tightened. Sullivan noticed. Again. Emily lifted the rifle and inspected it with quick, economical movements. No performance. No attempt to impress the men watching her. Sullivan pointed toward the empty lane. "You saw Grant's problem from 10 feet away." "Yes." "You stopped a live firing sequence." "Because his optic had shifted." "And you were right." Emily looked at him. "Is that difficult to say?" One of the younger SEALs lowered his head to hide a smile. Sullivan didn't react. "You think you're better than my shooters?" "I already told you I didn't say that." "Then what are you saying?" Emily closed the bolt on an empty chamber. "That equipment doesn't care how experienced you are." Sullivan stepped closer. "Neither does steel." Emily's eyes shifted toward the targets. There it was. The challenge. Not spoken like an insult. Spoken like two professionals who had reached the point where words were no longer useful. Sullivan gestured downrange. 3 targets. Emily waited. Increasing distance. Same conditions my team gets. No special treatment. I wasn't expecting any. First target at 600. Emily lowered herself onto the firing mat. Mitchell approached Sullivan quietly. "Commander." "What? You sure you want to do this?" Sullivan looked at him. "Why wouldn't I?" Mitchell glanced toward Emily. For a second, he seemed ready to answer. Then he stopped. "No reason." Sullivan caught that hesitation. You know something I don't? Mitchell's face became unreadable. Probably. Before Sullivan could press him, Emily spoke from the mat. Commander. He turned. She had settled behind the rifle. Perfectly still. Whenever you're ready. Sullivan raised one hand. Range control activated the first target. Steel appeared 600 meters away. Emily studied it through the optic. Sullivan expected adjustments. There were none. One breath. Her finger entered the trigger guard. The rifle cracked. Clang. Center mass. Emily cycled the action. No smile. No reaction. She simply waited. Sullivan stared at the distant steel, then raised his hand again. Second target. Farther into the valley, another silhouette began to rise. This time, the wind was changing. And Emily Carter finally looked interested. The second target rose at 900 meters, half hidden against a pale wall of rock. Emily didn't fire. The wind near the firing line pushed steadily from left to right, but farther downrange, dust curled in the opposite direction. Sullivan watched her through binoculars. Problem? No. Emily adjusted the elevation turret. 2 clicks. Then she waited. Tyler Grant stood behind the spotting scope, still thinking about the damaged mount Emily had noticed before anyone else. Wind's moving, he said. Emily didn't answer. 5 seconds passed. Then the grass below the distant target flattened briefly. Her finger moved to the trigger. Crack. The rifle recoiled. A moment later, clang. Grant leaned closer to the scope. Hit. Center right. Emily cycled the bolt. Sullivan lowered his binoculars. Good correction. Wind changed halfway. I saw it. Emily glanced back at him. Eventually. Mitchell turned away, hiding the smallest smile. Sullivan caught it. Something funny, Chief? No, Commander. Good. He signaled range control. Third target. The final silhouette rose beyond 1,200 meters, positioned near the edge of a secondary berm. This was the shot Sullivan wanted to see. Distance. Heat shimmer. Uneven wind. A narrow exposure window. Emily found the target. Then did nothing. 10 seconds passed. 15. Grant checked the spotting scope. Target's clean. Emily remained still. Sullivan waited another 5 seconds. Carter. Hold. The target is live. I know. Then engage. No response. Sullivan stepped closer. You made 900 look easy. What's the problem? Emily's eye stayed behind the optic. The target isn't the problem. Sullivan frowned. What is? She didn't answer immediately. Her breathing changed. Not from nerves. Concentration. Emily shifted the rifle slightly, looking past the steel instead of directly at it. Then her finger came completely away from the trigger. Range isn't clear. Grant looked up. Range control cleared it 5 minutes ago. They missed someone. Sullivan raised his binoculars. He scanned the target. The berm. The service road beyond it. Nothing. I don't see anyone. Emily continued watching. Neither do I. Sullivan lowered the binoculars. Then what are we talking about? I saw movement behind the berm. What kind? White fabric. Left side. Low. Grant searched again. Could have been debris. Could have. Sullivan's expression hardened. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one. The firing line went quiet. Sullivan looked toward the target again. Nothing moved. Carter, you have a confirmed lane and an authorized target. Emily's voice remained calm. I have an unanswered question. Range control says it's clear. Then asking them to verify it shouldn't be a problem. Sullivan stared at her. The challenge had changed without his permission. A minute earlier, he had been testing whether Emily Carter could hit steel. Now she was refusing the easiest part of the test. Take the shot. Emily didn't move. That's a direct instruction. I understand. Then engage. Her answer came quietly. No. Grant's eyes widened. Mitchell stopped breathing for a beat. Sullivan stepped beside the firing mat. Give me one reason. Emily finally lifted her head from the rifle. Because missing a target costs a score. She pointed beyond the distant berm. Being wrong about what's behind it costs more. For several seconds, Sullivan said nothing. Then something pale appeared beyond the left edge of the berm. A flash. Gone. Emily looked at him. There. Sullivan's binoculars came up. This time, he saw it too. Sullivan kept the binoculars fixed on the left side of the berm. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the white shape appeared again. This time it stayed visible long enough to become unmistakable. A man. Cease fire. Sullivan's voice changed instantly. Grant stepped away from the rifle. Sullivan grabbed his radio. Range control, I have unauthorized personnel in Sector 9. Confirm immediately. Static answered. Then silence. Emily remained prone, but her hand had moved completely away from the weapon. Mitchell stared downrange. How many? Emily kept watching. 3. Grant looked at her. I only see 2. Exactly. Sullivan turned. What? Emily pointed beyond the berm. Your board listed 2 maintenance personnel for that sector. Correct. There are 3. The radio crackled. Commander, range control. We show 2 authorized maintenance technicians. Both should be outside the hot area. Sullivan's jaw tightened. Negative. I have visual movement inside the sector. Lock it down. Copy. Stand by. A maintenance truck appeared beyond the service road. 2 white men emerged from behind the berm. Grant counted them. That's 2. Emily didn't move. Wait. 5 seconds. 10. Then a third man climbed from a shallow drainage cut carrying a coil of cable. Nobody on the firing line spoke. Sullivan slowly lowered his binoculars. 3. Exactly as Emily had said. The radio came alive again. Commander, confirmed. Third technician entered under a separate work order. He wasn't added to this morning's range board. Sullivan's face hardened. Keep the sector cold until I personally clear it. Understood. He lowered the radio. Grant stared at the target he'd been watching moments earlier. If she'd fired. He didn't finish. Nobody needed him to. Sullivan looked at Emily. How did you know there were 3? I didn't. That answer surprised him more than the number. You just said there were. I saw 2 different patterns of movement behind the berm before the first man appeared. Then I saw the white fabric. Emily rose and cleared her rifle. That gave me a question. Not an answer. Sullivan watched her remove the magazine. And a question was enough to stop the shot. For a sniper. She looked at him. It has to be. The words landed without accusation. Emily bent down and collected her 2 spent cases. Sullivan had spent years teaching men to overcome hesitation. Move faster. Decide faster. Shoot before the opportunity disappeared. But standing there, he realized restraint required its own kind of discipline. Anyone could pull a trigger because a target was authorized. Claire, no, Emily, had refused because authorization didn't erase uncertainty. You disobeyed a direct instruction, Sullivan said. Emily stood. Yes. You don't seem concerned about that. I'd be more concerned if I'd obeyed it. Mitchell looked down. Grant said nothing. Sullivan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Fair. It was the first concession he'd given her all morning. Emily closed her rifle case halfway. Sullivan stopped her. Don't pack yet. She looked up. You've shown me you know when not to shoot. His eyes moved toward the far end of the valley. Now I want to see you shoot. Emily followed his gaze. Unknown distance. Yes. Spotter? None. Cold bore. Sullivan nodded. A faint trace of interest appeared in her eyes. Crosswind? The valley decides. Emily closed the case completely. Then reopened it. Clear the range properly this time, Commander. Sullivan reached for his radio. This time, he didn't take offense. He checked. The far end of the valley remained silent for 12 minutes while Sullivan checked every sector twice. Access roads were closed. Maintenance teams were accounted for. Range control confirmed the impact area clear. Only then did Sullivan turn toward Emily. Range is yours. She carried her rifle to a firing position beyond a concrete line, where dry grass bent beneath a shifting crosswind. No prepared distance card waited there. No spotter settled beside her. Somewhere against the distant ridge, range control had placed a single white steel target. Emily lowered herself behind the rifle. Sullivan stood several feet back. First round hit, he said. Unknown distance. I remember. Emily found the target through her optic. Grant searched with binoculars beside Mitchell. Got it. That's way past 1200. Emily said nothing. 30 seconds passed. Then 40. The wind nearest them pushed hard from left to right. Farther downrange, dust lifted from the valley floor and drifted the opposite way. Sullivan watched Emily's hands. She made one elevation adjustment. Then stopped. You have the target? Yes. Then what are you waiting for? Emily kept her eye behind the glass. The valley. Sullivan frowned. What about it? It hasn't finished talking. Grant glanced at Mitchell. Mitchell's expression stayed unreadable. Emily watched the terrain instead of the flags. Grass near the middle ridge leaned east. Heat shimmer above the target pulled slightly west. Then the dust between them suddenly collapsed. Her breathing slowed. One final click. Silence. The rifle cracked. Recoil pushed into her shoulder. Everyone waited. 1 second. 2. Then, clang. Steel answered from the ridge. Grant raised the laser rangefinder. 1,462 yards. Sullivan looked at Emily. She had already cycled the action. No smile. No celebration. Again, he said. Emily glanced back. You asked for a first-round hit. I want to know if it was luck. Luck doesn't care how many times you test it. Mitchell almost smiled. Sullivan didn't. Second shot. Emily returned to the optic. The wind shifted harder this time. She waited. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Sullivan felt the impatience rising in the men behind him, but Emily seemed untouched by it. Then the grass below the ridge changed direction. Her finger moved. Crack. Clang. Grant stared through the spotting scope. Same plate. Less than 3 inches from the first impact. Silence followed. Mitchell stepped forward and looked through the scope himself. For one brief moment, habit moved faster than caution. Still got it, ma'am. Sullivan turned. Mitchell froze. Emily slowly lifted her head from the stock. Their eyes met. Mitchell immediately corrected himself. Carter. But the word had already landed. Sullivan stared at him. Ma'am. Commander, you've known me 9 years, Chief. You don't call civilian attachments ma'am. Mitchell's face tightened. Emily cleared the chamber and began packing the rifle. Sullivan stepped closer. Carter. What exactly is your rank? She looked at him, calm as ever. Before she could answer, Mitchell spoke quietly. Commander, if you really want to know who she is, check her personnel file again. Sullivan frowned. I already did. Mitchell held his gaze. Then request the version your clearance couldn't open. Emily closed the rifle case with 2 soft clicks. And suddenly Sullivan understood that the hardest target on the range had never been 1,400 yards away. It had been standing in front of him all morning. Sullivan reached the operations building without speaking to anyone. The secure door locked behind him with a heavy metallic click. He sat at the terminal and entered Emily Carter's name. Her profile appeared immediately. Emily Carter. Precision Warfare Attachment. Rank, restricted. Operational history, restricted. Advanced qualifications, restricted. Command status, restricted. Sullivan entered his credentials. Access denied. He stared at the screen. Then he entered his command authorization code. The system processed the request for several seconds. Access denied. Sullivan leaned back. As commander of the training element, he routinely handled classified operational material. Yet he couldn't access the rank of a woman standing on his own firing range. Mitchell's words returned to him. Request the version your clearance couldn't open. Sullivan picked up the secure phone. Naval Special Warfare Command. Commander Jack Sullivan. I need personnel verification on Emily Carter. The duty officer went silent. Stand by, Commander. Nearly a minute passed. Then a different voice came through. Sullivan, this is Rear Admiral Michael Prescott. Sullivan straightened. Admiral. Why are you requesting Carter's record? She's been assigned to my facility, sir. Her file is restricted above my clearance. A pause. Assigned to your facility, yes. Assigned under you, no. Sullivan frowned. Sir. Prescott's next words came slowly. Who told you Captain Carter worked for you? Sullivan stopped. Captain. He looked at the blank rank field on the screen. Captain Carter. That's correct. A Navy captain. Oh, 6. Senior to him. For several seconds, Sullivan heard nothing except the low hum of the secure terminal. Then the morning replayed in fragments. My range. My shooters. Then show me. Take the shot. He had spoken to her as though she were an attachment waiting to prove she belonged there. Why wasn't her rank disclosed? Sullivan asked. Because you weren't supposed to evaluate her based on rank. Sullivan looked through the narrow window toward the range. Emily was visible beside the equipment tables, calmly packing ammunition as if nothing unusual had happened. Then what exactly is she doing here? Prescott didn't answer immediately. Captain Carter works with a senior precision warfare assessment group. Some portions of her operational history remain outside your access. Sullivan's grip tightened around the phone. Assessment group? Yes. The word settled heavily. She's not here to qualify. No. She's not here to train under my instructors. No. Sullivan already knew the next answer before he asked. Then who is she evaluating? Prescott paused. Your shooters. Your instructors. Your range procedures. Another beat. And you. Sullivan closed his eyes briefly. The damaged optic. The third maintenance technician. Emily refusing his instruction. The cold bore hit. None of it had been her examination. It had been his. Does she have authority over this evaluation? Commander, for the purpose of this review, Captain Carter's authority sits above your training command. Sullivan stared at the screen. She hadn't merely outranked him. He had spent the entire morning challenging the officer sent to judge whether his program met the standard. Understood, Admiral. Prescott's voice softened slightly. Do you? Sullivan looked toward the range again. I'm beginning to. He ended the call and stood. When Sullivan returned outside, conversations faded as he crossed the firing line. Emily was kneeling beside her rifle case. Mitchell saw Sullivan's expression and said nothing. Emily looked up. Sullivan stopped several feet away. This time, there was no challenge in his voice. Captain Carter. Grant's face changed. Mitchell straightened. Every operator nearby went silent. Emily rose slowly. Commander. And in that moment, Jack Sullivan finally understood that he'd spent the morning demanding proof from the one person who had never needed to prove anything to him. Every operator on the range heard it. Captain Carter. The title moved through the silence faster than any explanation could have. Grant looked at Mitchell, then back at Emily. Captain. Emily stood beside her rifle case. Nothing about her changed. Same calm expression. Same weathered uniform. Same woman who had spent the morning saying less than everyone around her. Commander, she replied. Sullivan held her gaze. You could have corrected me when you arrived. I could have. You could have corrected me when I challenged you. Yes. Why didn't you? Emily paused. Would you have treated me differently? Sullivan opened his mouth, then stopped. He knew the answer. So did everyone listening. Emily nodded slightly. That's why. Sullivan glanced toward Mitchell. You knew. I recognized her, Mitchell said. And you said nothing. It wasn't my information to give. Sullivan looked back at Emily. His embarrassment was still there, but something stronger had begun replacing it. Curiosity. Admiral Prescott said you're here to evaluate this program. Correct. My shooters? Yes. My instructors? Yes. Sullivan waited. Emily didn't make him ask twice. And your command decisions? The words landed cleanly. No satisfaction behind them. No attempt to make him smaller. Sullivan looked toward the distant berm where the third technician had appeared. So when you stopped that shot, I was doing what any responsible shooter should do. And when I ordered you to take it? Emily's eyes stayed on his. I was watching what you did after I refused. Grant shifted uncomfortably. Sullivan didn't. And what did I do? You pushed. A beat. Then you verified. Sullivan absorbed that. Is that good? It's better than refusing to verify. Mitchell almost smiled. Sullivan exhaled slowly. And the shooting challenge? Your idea. You knew I was testing you. Yes. While you were evaluating me. Yes. For the first time, Sullivan gave a short, humorless laugh. So I spent the entire morning evaluating the woman sent to evaluate me. Emily shook her head. No, Commander. Sullivan looked at her. You spent the morning being evaluated. Nobody moved. There it was. The real target. Not the steel 1,400 yards away. Not the damaged optic. Not even Emily's marksmanship. Him. His assumptions. His reactions. His willingness to listen when someone he believed was beneath him saw something he didn't. Sullivan straightened. Then, in front of his entire team, he raised his hand in a crisp salute. Emily returned it immediately. No triumph. No smile. Just two officers acknowledging what should have been understood from the beginning. Their hands lowered. For what it's worth, Sullivan said, I was wrong about you. Emily picked up her rifle case. About my rank? No. He looked toward the valley. About needing your rank before taking you seriously. Something softened in Emily's expression. Barely. That's worth more. She started toward the operations building. Sullivan watched her for several steps. Captain. Emily stopped. What happens to my evaluation? She looked back at him. It isn't finished. And tomorrow? 0600. Sullivan nodded. I'll be here. Emily turned away. Then she paused once more. Commander? Yes. Bring your rifle. Sullivan looked at her. For the first time all day, Emily smiled. Tomorrow, you get evaluated from the other side of the scope. At 0557 the next morning, Jack Sullivan walked onto the range carrying his rifle. Emily was already there. She stood at the edge of the firing line, coffee in one hand, watching the valley disappear beneath a thin layer of morning haze. No audience waited for them. No steel was moving. Even Mitchell had stayed back near the operations building. Sullivan placed his rifle case beside hers. You said 0600. Emily checked her watch. You're 3 minutes early. Trying to improve my evaluation. Don't try too hard. Sullivan almost smiled. Yesterday, he might have heard arrogance in that sentence. Today, he heard something else. Experience. Emily pointed toward the valley. What do you see? Sullivan studied the range. Wind from the west. Maybe 4 knots. Where? He looked at her. Here. I didn't ask about here. Sullivan turned back toward the valley. The nearest flag leaned east. Farther out, another barely moved. Beneath it, dry grass shifted in the opposite direction. He narrowed his eyes. Cross-current beyond the first ridge. Emily nodded. Better. Sullivan opened his rifle case. That's the evaluation. That's the beginning. 20 minutes later, the rest of the team arrived. Grant stopped when he saw Sullivan prone behind the rifle and Emily standing beside him. Mitchell folded his arms. No one said a word. Sullivan adjusted his optic. Target? Emily pointed toward a distant section of rock. You tell me. He searched. 10 seconds. 20. Then he found a small steel silhouette almost lost against the terrain. Got it. Distance. Sullivan studied the landscape. Yesterday, he would have reached immediately for technology. Today, he watched the ground. The ridges. The vegetation. The shimmer above the rocks. 1300, give or take. Emily said nothing. Sullivan adjusted. His finger moved toward the trigger. Not yet. He stopped. Yesterday, those words would have felt like a challenge to his authority. Today, he simply asked, what am I missing? Emily pointed toward the grass beneath the second ridge. Sullivan watched. Nothing. Then the grass shifted. A moment later, the distant flag followed. His expression changed. The gust reaches the target late. Exactly. Sullivan waited. 10 seconds. 20. The wind settled. Emily spoke quietly. Now. Sullivan fired. The rifle cracked through the valley. A second later, clang. Grant smiled behind the spotting scope. Hit. Sullivan opened the bolt and looked up at Emily. She gave one small nod. No applause followed. None was needed. Sullivan rose and turned toward his team. Yesterday, I thought Captain Carter came here with something to prove. The men listened. She didn't. He glanced at Emily. I did. Silence. Sullivan looked back toward the range. Remember that the next time someone sees something you don't. Their rank doesn't make the observation right. Their experience doesn't automatically make it right either. He paused. You check. You listen. You verify. Emily watched him without speaking. Sullivan picked up his rifle case. Anything else for my evaluation, Captain? Plenty. A few men laughed quietly. Sullivan did too. Then Emily looked toward the distant target. But you're learning. That was all she gave him. It was enough. Jack Sullivan had challenged Emily Carter because he thought skill needed to announce itself before it deserved his respect. By the time he discovered she outranked him, the insignia had become almost irrelevant. Her judgment had spoken first. Her discipline had spoken louder. And her ability had settled the rest. Rank could require a salute. Authority could issue an order. But respect was different. Respect was earned. And Emily Carter had earned theirs long before anyone on that range knew they were supposed to call her captain.